Hello and welcome to another of our wonderful series of composer-arranger interviews. And I have with me the amazing Paul Ayres. Hi, Paul.
Hello, Craig. Hello, everyone.
And where are you speaking from now exactly?
This is the corner of my study in our house in West London. The piano is here because with my own choirs, we're doing quite a lot of rehearsing on Zoom. So this is where I play the notes from.
There you go. Yes, snap. I've seen many similar
Mm,
in recent months. So you're just doing everything on Zoom now?
pretty much. I've actually got one very small group, a student choir of about six singers. So we've got the privilege of actually meeting in real life.
Right.
Although we're
Wow.
kind of waiting any moment we're going to have to go onto video.
Thank goodness you were six. That's the perfect number.
Yeah.
And so where are they based, and what sort of stuff do you sing with them?
Um, this is the choir at London College of Music, which is part of the University of West London, so it's kind of local to me, just down the road. And we do a mixture of things. But what's nice in a way is being limited to a small group. We can make it a more of a vocal ensemble, so it's more working on their individual voices rather than
That's great.
the big choir that it usually is when all the students and community members join in.
Hmm. And well, we've known each other for a few years, haven't we? I think I bought something off your website about 15, 20 years ago, maybe even longer than that.
There's it is quite a small world, the choral world. So even if we don't meet people in person, we are all kind of aware of each other's work as choir directors and accompanists and arrangers and composers. Yeah.
Yeah, I was working with a chamber choir at the turn of the century, sort of 2000 to 2005 in Harpenden. Wonderful choir called the Lee Singers, and they're always after interesting arrangements. I think we got something of yours that had wonderful sort of counterpoint and extra parts written in, which I believe is a speciality of your arranging there.
It's that is one of the tricks in my bag. Yes,
We can
that's
come on
right.
to that. We can come on to that a bit later. There's a question especially about that later on. So I want to take you right back now because there's a question I always start these interviews with, and then we see how it goes from there. And the question is, do you remember when you were young, when you were little, your very first, earliest awareness of music, and maybe how important it would be to you? But it doesn't have to be that importance. What was your an earliest awareness of music in your life?
I think I always enjoyed music, and my dad had quite a big record collection of classical music, but none of the family were performing musicians, either amateur or professional. It's just something they enjoyed. And what I love to do is is to listen to the theme tunes on the TV, the radio, and try to work them out to the piano. Try to to play Paddington or Super Ted or whatever it was.
Paddington, oh, make excellent. Has that continued into later life? Where you did you try and work out Tomorrow's World when that came on?
There are some that are trickier, aren't there? Like Tomorrow's World. Anything
Yeah,
somebody
that's by Johnny Dankworth, I think. It's an amazing piece.
right?
One of
Yeah.
my favourites.
No, I have a lot of love for theme tunes and
Have you
film tunes.
written one?
Uh, no, surprisingly, the BBC and the independent TV production companies haven't been ringing me up. But
Not
who
around to
knows?
you yet.
There's still time.
There it is. So yes, a lot of people had their dads had a classical vinyl collection. That I think I'm among that number as well. Is
Mm.
there one of those records that that made an impression on you at an early age? Can you pick one out of your dad's vinyl?
Um,
Did he play
not
one regularly on Sundays, or was it just left up to you to discover the selection?
I think it wasn't when I was particularly young. I think once I'd got into music, and I got into music partly from having piano lessons that I kept nagging my parents to organise for me, and also because my friend recruited me into the local church choir. Because in those days you got paid pocket money for singing in the church choir, and you got an extra pocket money bonus if you recruited your friend from school. So we all try to recruit our friends from school. Um,
Plenty.
once I was into music, the records that I picked out and played a lot were the Britain War Requiem, just because it's so amazing, but also Rubber Soul. And I think that kind of sums up my sort of
Yeah.
I mean, and they're both. I
Favorite
think they're
Beatles?
both from the '60s, aren't they? But in different ways. British '60s classics.
I think it's my favorite Beatles album, Rubber Soul. Definitely.
Mm.
Yeah,
I
love.
think that's the only one they had, so it became my favorite.
Well, lucky you. Did you have a little cassette player, maybe of your own, when you were small, and then played your own little cassettes on that and record things?
Yes, I used to record things off the radio in the days when you have to look through the radio schedules, and if there was a really interesting concert or something, you'd
Yeah.
you'd record on a cassette or ask your friend to. I
Hold.
remember even dropping a cassette round at my friend's house, saying, because there's going to be a really good piece by John McCabe. I was a complete nerd.
Good for
I
you.
think it was John McCabe, someone like that.
At a young age. Well, I'm suggesting that you were a bit older then, and was there a teacher at school that inspired you, especially in music?
Um,
And maybe primary school or secondary school?
I had a very encouraging music teacher at secondary school. I mean, in primary school, I wasn't really into music that much. I
Hmm.
did. I sort of got into it really at age 10, 11, 12. I wasn't. I was definitely not a Mozart prodigy, learning music at 6 or anything like that.
There's only one of those.
I wanted to be all the usual things like a footballer and a detective and a I don't know journalist, all kinds of sort of because no one I didn't know anyone that did music as a job. It never really occurred to me. I just thought people did music as a hobby. So maybe I'll play the piano and just because I enjoyed it. It was only later I sort of got into it, I suppose, more seriously.
Hmm.
Anyway, sorry, I'd forgotten your question now. What was
It
your
was
question?
a particular teacher that might have inspired you. So I think you were going
Right.
maybe in
Yeah.
your secondary school stage. Was there somebody who?
Yeah, well, I've got to say it was the choir master at the local church where I sang in the choir, particularly when my voice changed and I couldn't sing nice treble anymore, just this kind of rather strangled half alto tenor, who encouraged me to play the organ because he knew I, played piano, and gave me a few lessons on the organ, and then did this thing that I found terrifying at the time, by age 13, and play for a few of the hymns in the church service, which actually throws you in at the deep end because you can't stop halfway because you think you've got it wrong. You have because everyone's singing along with you. So
Yeah.
that was a really really good encouragement and good sort of real life training as a musician rather than just learning the exam pieces.
No, absolutely. I remember, when I was at doing my cathedral training, discovering a piece of music and smuggling it back to the school, and taking it to the practice rooms and sort of saying, "Now, why is that chord so amazing?" Was there a resonance with you? I mean, I know you would try to sort of work out the theme tunes. Was there that inquisitive nature? Did that flow into the church music as well?
Yes, yeah, I think it's very much part of that tradition, and it's especially once I started uh, playing the organ because unlike I mean I learned piano then organ. I've never learned an orchestral instrument, so I haven't got that any orchestral background. But I'm assuming when you learn an instrument, and especially when you play in an orchestra, you play what's there. There isn't very much room for improvisation, but especially when you're um, working as an organist or just actually working with choirs playing on the piano, you have to do things like harmonize when the chords aren't written out, or maybe we just need an extra 8 bars there because we need something to be filled in. So that it was a sort of tradition where you learned how the music went, but you were actively encouraged to play around with it.
Mm.
I mean, things like reharmonizing the last verse of a hymn, stuff like that.
Yes. And so, where did how did this turn out to you being a composer? Was there some spark of start, or did you just suddenly sit down and write something? What was the first inkling that you either wanted to be a composer or discovered that you were?
I think I always liked the idea of composing music, but probably when I was younger, it was in exactly the same way that I maybe thought it would be really great to be a painter or a novelist or a poet, and all children draw pictures and write stories. And so as soon as I learned the basics of music notation in my, notebooks, I wouldn't just write a poem. I'd just write a tune and write out the 5 lines. I like the idea of being able to come up with something, and yeah. So like I say, it was all sort of a little bit more as a sort of hobby that I liked.
Do you
And then
remember
the more music I did, the more I got into it.
the name of the first thing you wrote?
It might have been one of the first. It's probably something called Minuet in G, and it
Oh.
was probably after going to a piano lesson and learning a piece by Mozart called Minuet in G, and it was probably really similar. But you start writing with the kind of music that you think classical music is, so it's based on that, and probably an imaginary theme tune for a TV program with a car chase, because car chases are always exciting, aren't they?
Yeah, yes, they are. Yes, with all those boxes, empty boxes, they have to nick out.
Into the cardboard boxes.
Yeah. Take us a bit further. Let's go into sort of was there some further education, and was that a musical based further education with you by that time?
So mid-teens, I was playing piano and organ. I was accompanying some local theatre groups as well,
All right.
and as well as so the sort of the classical and the lighter stuff. I always loved musicals as well, and I thought I should write a musical. And I was very inspired by Jesus Christ Superstar, and it was a biblical musical, and I went to the local theatre that had a youth theatre company and sort of did Amdram as well as touring productions. And I said to the director, I've got this song, I want to write a musical. And amazingly, because this was when I was about 15, he said, yeah, we could put that on. So it was a sort of a youth cast, all sort of people from my school and nearby schools. I think we were all 18 or under, and we did a week-long run of a musical. So I really that was my first, almost my first performed piece. Was quite a large scale thing.
Fantastic.
And then and then it was time to start thinking about where to study at university. And I was still thinking, music's great, but I'll go and do a maths degree or a science or English, because you've got to get a proper job at some point. And it was sort of right at the last minute. I thought, well, actually, why don't I study music and just see if I can work on it even further. And since then, I did a music degree, and after the degree, tried to continue this world of making music all the time and avoiding getting a real proper job.
Yes.
And 30 years later, I'm still just about getting away with it.
Aren't we all? Did you discover at university your love of choral music, perhaps? Because I know you as a choral composer, but you're probably many other things.
Yes, I think it was a gradual process. I'd say I was equally interested in instrumental and theatre and all kinds of things. I think it's probably when I left university and I tried to start applying for freelance music positions, and so it's partly dictated by the opportunities you get. I applied to lots of theatres to be musical director or composer. Didn't have so much success in that area. I applied for anything I could, piano playing things, conducting things, but there just seemed to be more choral opportunities. So I got a couple of positions with choral societies, one as a conductor and one as an accompanist. And so from then on, I suppose this sort of, I slightly specialised in choral music just because there seemed to be more opportunities, or I was more lucky in getting a few doors opening in that world.
Yes, and are you one of the first people that I came across who had set up their own website to publish their own music? Was that something that you just happened, or did you talk to somebody? And how did that? So, because that's quite early on when the internet was quite young, I suppose, when you started that.
Yes, I'm not particularly great at sort of tech things, but I had some friends that helped me on that side of things. It was. I just kind of felt one has to put one's music out there, and I did all the usual things that I suppose all composers do, and all novelists send off their manuscripts to publishers to see if they'll publish their novel, and not many novels get published. And so with my scores, I sent them off to OUP and Boozy and Hawks and all the music publishers. Got very, very nice polite rejection letters, and they said maybe send us another piece in a couple of years. So I did that, and then got rejected again. And I thought, well, I've written the music. I might as well put it out there and see if anyone wants it. So, yeah, and that was when so I was quite lucky in a way, because through the website you actually can reach more people and people that are outside your usual circle. But I'm I'm 50 now, so any youngsters listening to this interview won't remember, but when I started out, you had to write out your music by hand. You had to take it down to the local library to get it photocopied, but not on a Wednesday, because everything was shut on a Wednesday. The libraries and half the shops in the town, and then you'd have to put the music in envelopes, and there were no MIDI demo tracks. You could maybe play it on the piano into your cassette recorder, and then send a cassette of you playing. So it's a completely different world now. So yeah,
it's all at our fingertips, isn't it?
Mm.
Well, I was very delighted that we got in contact when you wrote "We'll Play Our Part." So take us back a bit further. I love the piece; it's very unusual, and I know it's got a link to the West End and to theatres. So I'd love you to tell us that story about how the piece came about.
Yes, there was a competition, a call for scores earlier this year, earlier 2020, organised by someone that was doing a big fundraiser for West End theatres that had just closed down. So it was to raise money to support actors and musicians and other theatre folk, and they wanted a song that they could release as basically a fundraising exercise. And so I thought I would give this one a go. Unfortunately, it didn't win the competition, but it's like a lot of things. They had about 800 entries.
Wow,
so imagine
amazing!
800 songs, and from all around the world to see which one you like best. But that's why there's this gave me the idea initially of we'll play our part, because actors, as in Shakespeare's Seven Ages of Man, we all play our part and strut our stuff, but also we're trying to help each other out in these times. And so that's why I wrote the song. And that was so it was written maybe to be just like solo vocal and piano or band. I think they were offering a band to accompany, West End band. And because I worked with a lot of choirs, I thought, well, hey, why not adapt it for choir? So it's SATB or two-part choir, and some. I've had a few solo singers sing it as well, so it's hopefully an adaptable piece and something for these days.
Very generous of you to initially let it out free, and I think
that felt the right thing to do, given that it was it was written. That was always what its intention was as a song. Was to be part of a fundraiser.
And I now we're the next section of music we're trying to help you to promote is your 3-part Christmas arrangements. And I know that you've had these for quite a while, haven't you? Did you have to write one a year or 2 a year for a general purpose, or was it all in a big lump? How did they come about? They're wonderful little arrangements.
They came about purely to serve a practical need, because it's not going to happen this year, but I found most Christmases I was asked, directly or indirectly, to provide some carol singers for all sorts of, events, sometimes outside, indoors, functions, concerts. And very often these opportunities and invitations came in at the last minute. So there wasn't really time to do what one might do usually, and sort of, sort out a musical program, order the music, rehearsal the parts. So I needed some sort of fairly flexible arrangements that were kind of ready to sing almost at the drop of a hat. And I like singing all kinds of things, but there seemed to be a little bit of a gap in the market, in that there's some great Christmas music that's a bit complicated, that does take quite a few rehearsals.
Yes.
And then if you just read the standard SATB, what I might call hymn book versions, and that's nothing against hymns, because I love hymns, some of the sort of standard easy arrangements are actually a little bit dull to just to do a whole evening of that, everything in a 1-4-5 chord.
There is definitely a divide there, isn't there? And also the other thing I like about your arrangements is they're SAB, they're only 3-part. And actually that resonated with me, because there's a lot of our community choirs who have signed up to what we do. They only have one lower section. It's a very common thing.
That's the same for some of the choirs that I work with. And actually, and even in a big choir, SA baritone gives you quite a good balance, because even in numbers of choirs that have tenors and basses, quite often sopranos, there are more sopranos and altos than tenors and basses. It also means that for some of the functions that I was having to help find singers for, you could just do it with 3 people. You know, if it's 3 singers that are confident in holding their own part. So I wanted to make them sort of interesting, but not overly complicated. And you know, I love the idea of I love writing music in 3 parts, because it does make you really concentrate on what notes are absolutely necessary.
Yes.
It's a great, you know, if you've got a choir that can sing in 8 parts and a piano and an orchestra, you can put anything in. It'll just become layer upon layer of sound, and that's fine. But it's almost the easy way out. You have to sort of really refine the task.
Yeah.
It was Stravinsky, or I'm sure it's Stravinsky, who said, "The more you're limited artistically, the more you're free." Because actually, it's like doing a painting when you're only allowed to use a certain number of colours. You have to actually be a little bit more creative that way.
Yes. No padding. I remember my organ teacher and composition teacher at the school told me once that I think I'd written a particularly dense fugue, you know, with no gaps, and maybe 4 or 5 parts. And he said, "It's what you've done is you've stuffed a goose with pâté de foie gras. You know, it's a completely useless exercise. You're just leaving."
That is quite an image, isn't it?
I know. Sorry about that. But anyway, I'll erase that one later on. But I think it had a sort of resonance of what you said, because yes, 3 parts alone. It's very clean and very doable, and they're very enjoyable to sing as well. There's something a little bit extra in each of them. I think you've written them very skillfully, and I think people will definitely benefit. Particularly now we've got recordings of them, and you know, in lockdown we need recordings to sing with and to and from and whatever. So hopefully that will it will help get them out there. One more last question: what are you writing at the moment? Are you writing anything now? And maybe off your own bat, or are you responding to yet another clarion call for a piece?
I always have lots of things sort of bubbling away on the go.
Okay, so you know, give us a few. Give us a few of things, or perhaps you're not allowed to say.
Well, okay. I mean, so on the piano, there's always sort of, you know, lots of copies of things. I've and you know, what's nice from my point of view is, you know, if one day you're stuck on ideas on one piece, you know, you get stuck in a rut, because there's always the second or third piece you can work on, and then you come back to the first piece, and that sort of refreshed your career, your mojo a little bit. So I've been asked to make a couple of arrangements. One's of this Crimea River, the sort of the jazz standard.
While you think about it, I was looking at Crimea River earlier today.
Because there we are.
Somebody was comparing the different performances, Julie London and Barbara Streisand and Michael Bublé, and saying which one of them were the most successful. And he liked the Streisand version, because she does muck around with it a lot, but she goes for the meaning of the words. And he thought that Bublé was a little bit sort of pompous and showy, and that actually this massive big band orchestration kind of detracted from the heart of the song, which is basically saying, you know, you cry me a river, I'm not that interested. You know, the lack of sympathy, you know, was sort of what Streisand got very well, with a sort of little bit of disdain.
Yeah, and that brings us back to our idea of, you know, less is more, and actually a really good song doesn't need lots of accoutrements. I mean, it can do, but it doesn't need it if it's a really good song already on its own. I've remembered the other song now. It's "You Will Be Found" from Evan Hansen. So it's quite a new song for a upper voice school choir.
Very popular and very contemporary.
And then, sort of in terms of original compositions, I've just written an opera, but only a short one, a very short opera.
My favourite.
2 years, called, and the singers are playing the roles of dog and cat. And it's a dog and a cat who are left in a flat during lockdown, and suddenly the owner, who has been there for 3 months, goes out, and they're a bit flummoxed because they don't know whether the owner's gone out for good, or just because humans are getting back to their activities. And the whole premise was to do something to react to the old joke that was doing the rounds, that was, you know, when everyone had to stay home, all our dogs think we've given up our jobs to spend more quality time with them. For the cats, they assume that we've been fired, and it proves that we're the loser they always knew that we were. So it was playing around with those ideas.
Very nice. So you've written the lyrics as well, the libretto.
I have, with a bit of trepidation, and I did actually and when I've done this a couple of times now, I've had a few writing lessons from from a very good writer that I know, because I feel that having done music non-stop for 30 years, whatever you think of my music, I sort of know what I'm doing. Whereas writing words, I still need a little bit of help. So I feel I'm learning and growing as a writer as well.
That's terrific.
I
Well,
hope.
look forward to hearing that. When do you think that might be? Is that something that's coming, or is it going to be premiered at some point? Is it?
It's an online opera project, and again, that was from a call for scores as an opera group that wanted to do these miniature operas, in lockdown, but also about lockdown. So they wanted new stories.
Wow. Well, when it's ready, will you please let us know when the
Yeah,
we'll broadcast it out there and tell everyone where they can go and see it.
lovely. Thank you.
And then I'd love to. That's the dog and the cat. That's wonderful. We can add a few more pets into that for a follow up. Maybe at a farmyard, we can have sort of an entire cast of all the farmyard animals, and they can be.
You mean when it transfers to Broadway, then it will be a larger production? Yes, well,
Yes. Or the inevitable sequel. Paul, it's been lovely to talk to you. Find out more about your compositional ways and what makes you tick arranging wise. It's lovely to have you on board at Choir Community, and we hope to have many more pieces from you in the future.
lovely. Thank you very much, Craig.
Take
It's been
care.
good. Yeah. All
See
right.
you soon. Bye.
See you. Bye.